Okay. So it's very important to see that how many people are going to be there, whether we are going to be double in 35 years or we could double in 54 years if we reduce our growth rate. And so that's very important. Okay. Now, there are certain important demographic measures which you perhaps encounter off and on, and especially if you are not only studying demography, you are studying public health. There are some very simple ones, which is known as ratio. You often say male to female ratio. Ratio at birth. So what is that? What is the ratio? That one group is divided by one subgroup is divided by the other subgroup. To calculate sex ratio, you divide males by females. Usually multiply by 100 for simplicity's sake, and so usually the sex ratio at birth is about 105. You cannot do anything about it, provided you do what they do in China, that you go and try to get that what is the sex of the fetus, and then you abort it. And so you can fiddle with the sex ratio, otherwise it's 105. Then proportion, very simple. Proportion is that if the same thing you want to say, that what proportion are males and females, so you divide one subgroup by the total. And proportion is the same thing as percentage. If you multiply by 100, then it becomes percent. So there is a difference between ratio and proportion. And I often hear that what is the ratio of Sindh's population to Pakistan's population? And usually they are talking about percentage. Okay, what is the ratio to girls to boys in the class? That means boys divided by girls. What is at birth? So that is, it's not percentage. If you want to say how many male babies were born out of the total babies, then males divided by the total babies born, which is 0.51 or 51%. So that's the ratio is the two subgroups are independent of each other. What we say is the denominator contains one subgroup and the numerator is the other subgroup. So it's A divided by B. In terms of proportion, it is A divided by A plus B, the total population. So that is percentage also. Then rate. Rate is often used very widely in public health. What is that? Rate is basically a number divided by the population at risk, not necessarily the total population. Okay. So, and an event which occurred over a year divided by the population at risk, multiplied by a constant, usually is used as 1,000. So number of births occurred in a year, whole year. So you cannot calculate the birth rate for the year 2012 for obvious reason that 2012 all the births have not taken place yet. Okay, and when you are talking about the population at risk, because you are talking about how many babies are born in a population of certain number. In a population of 174 million in Pakistan, the official number, how many babies are born in Pakistan? So you divide the number of babies divided by population at risk. Now in this case, in case of birth rate and death rate, which is also known as crude rate and crude death rate, you just divide the number of babies born and number of deaths occurred in a year, for example in 2011, 2010, by population at risk. In this case, the population at risk would not be 175 million people, but it would be the average of the population, which was in January 2011 to December 2011. There is a mid-year population. Okay, so in this case, it is just for these two rates, because that rate, these two rates determine the rate of natural increase. And that's why they are also known as crude. The reason they are known as crude, because in both cases, the population at risk, for example, in birth rate, the population at risk is not the entire population. It's only women. And only women who are ages 15 to 29, or 15 to 49. And they also tend to have a different tendency to produce. Those who are younger, they are more prone to give birth than those who are older. Okay? And similarly, when you talk about death rate, it is the people who are very young, below age 5, and people who are above age 70 or what, they are more prone to die. And that's why it's known as crude death rate and crude birth rate. So I'll talk more about it a little later. Okay? So because of that reason, because crude rates are calculated for the entire population, you do specific rates. Specific rates, they become the real risk. And that's why you calculate infant mortality rate only for the babies born in a year, live birth. That becomes the denominator, that's at risk. And how many babies were born in a year? I'm sorry, how many babies died? That becomes infant mortality rate. Okay? And if you want to say that, okay, what is the risk of dying, or how many people are dying who are older, you say how many people who are, say, for example, 60 plus, and altogether in the denominator, and how many died of that age group. So that's how it's known as specific rates. I'll talk more about it. Another important thing in the rate is the constant. It varies from 1,000 to 100,000. Reason being that some events are very rare. Births and deaths occur, frequently. A lot of people die and a lot of babies are born. But something like maternal deaths or deaths due to a specific diseases, they are rare events. And that's why you can say and that's why when you talk about maternal mortality, you talk about 100,000 live births. You don't talk about 1,000 live births. In infant mortality, it is 1,000 live births. How many infants died? When you talk about maternal deaths, it's out of 100,000 births, how many women died due to maternal causes. So that's why it varies. Okay. Now there are measures which are known as cohort measures and measures which are period measures. Cohorts are basically different people who pass through a similar experience. People born in the same year, they are the same cohort. That means that they are going to experience the same kind of situation all their life. People got married at the same time. You see, maybe as they are different ages, some women or some men get married at different ages, so they are passed through different experience or similar experience. Then there could be class cohort, all the people who are admitted in 2011 in MPH program. They are going to pass through the similar cohort. So they may not be compared with the people who were admitted in 2010 because each of them have got through different experience. And so similar experience for each cohort. Against that, there's a period measure. Period is just measure takes a snapshot of the population. What is the prevalence? For example, you have studied in epidemiology, the prevalence rate. So that's what happened. You measured that this is the disease. You looked at 1,000 people. What is the prevalence of TB? So that's a point prevalence also. That's known as period measure. That you have done it during a period of time. The period measure may vary. Those diseases which are seasonal. In one season, in winter, there could be more people who are suffering from, headache and flu. And in summer, maybe not. So the period measures may vary depending on when you have collected the information, or it could be over a period of a year. So in 1 year, infant mortality rate was high. The second year it may not be. On the third year it could be again high. So it depends, you know. So that's and all the births, deaths, infant mortality are affected by the time you are taking into. There is a seasonality of birth, for example. You know, when does the birth occur most of the time? Most cases, what is the highest frequency of births? In most countries, is September, because most pregnancies occur in winter months, because people stay home, okay, in the absence of family planning, by the way, and the absence of contraception. So that's why you would see a lot of births occur in Pakistan during, you know, August, September, October months, you know, because of the winter, because they precede 9 months. And deaths also seasonal, okay, but not always, but it's possible. You know, in countries which is too cold and there's not enough heat available, so people may be dying because of cold. It does happen in Pakistan, by the way. People who are on the street, especially in India, the death rate in the winter goes up because a lot of people are there on the street, okay.